My name is Evan Jaffe, and for the past 27 years, I have been the rabbi of the Flemington Jewish Community Center in Flemington, New Jersey, and for the past 23 years, I have served as chaplain at two state institutions for the developmentally disabled, the Hunterdon Developmental Center and Greenbrook Regional Center. At both institutions, I conduct weekly religious services, and I have helped to facilitate transportation for residents from both to attend Shabbat morning services on a monthly basis at the FJCC. The purpose of my webinar and the challenge I hope to address is precisely as its title suggests. How do we include people with disabilities in our synagogues, our services, our synagogue-related social activities, our faith communities? My focus will be on adults with disabilities. Disabilities defined in the broadest way, from those with multiple impairments who reside in institution or group homes to those homebound elderly who lack transportation to a synagogue. In recent years, the American Jewish community has made enormous strides in tending to our children with disabilities. Our Hebrew schools now accommodate children with autism. We celebrate B'nai Mitzvah of children with Down syndrome and other impairments. But what happens after Hebrew school and bar or bat mitzvah? How are we to enable adults with disabilities to participate in religious life, in services, in life cycle events? What if some of these adults are nonverbal? What if they exhibit odd behaviors or speak out during the rabbi's sermon? Can synagogues be expected to be accessible to, say, a long-time member of a congregation who is no longer ambulatory, to be called to the Torah for an aliyah, a Torah honor? What about those who are hearing or sight impaired? Does the congregation provide big print prayer books? What about end-of-life issues? Have funeral arrangements been made for individuals with no family connections? And then there are the little things. A member of my congregation who is an expert in this field once said to me that you can tell a truly accessible congregation by the fact that they have drinking straws available for those not able to hold a glass or cup. As medical care improves and we live longer and longer lives, the question is not if, but when most of us will become disabled. The U.R.J. Rudderman initiative to include those with disabilities will at some point apply to nearly all of us, and certainly to members of our families. I want to share with you what more than a quarter of a century of working with people with disabilities has taught me. I came to this work with no prior experience, no formal training, no family member with disabilities. I was hired by the aforementioned Hunterdon Developmental and Greenbrook Regional Centers simply because there was no other rabbi in the area who wanted to serve them. I will speak to the practical aspects of inclusion, the logistics of identifying and getting people with disabilities to synagogue or providing services where they reside. A part of my presentation will focus on the personal and religious aspects of inclusion, particularly with those adults with severe disabilities. I have been privileged to have my own congregation and my congregations at the HDC and Greenbrook for many years. I have learned how to work with them and to bring all three, however imperfectly, together. I have come to discover that inclusion for the entire spectrum of disability is not that difficult, nor is it usually that costly. Creativity goes a long way. Resources are often out there waiting to be used if people are willing to access them. The rewards are great. Here is how I and others have done it. I want to structure my presentation on including individuals with disabilities along the lines of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The well-known psychologist wanted to understand what motivated people. He constructed a pyramid of needs with the most essential needs, air, food, water, at the base, and then moving up to safety and love to self-actualization. I will begin my discussion at the base of the pyramid with what might seem an obvious point, but often is not. If we want to include adults with disabilities, we must first identify who they are. I remember vividly the first time I walked through the doors of the Hunterdon Developmental Center. I was simply blown away. Some of you may be familiar with the bracha, the blessing, recited in response to seeing a person with disabilities that ends with Mishaneh Habriot, who makes people different. I was prompted to say it constantly. Never had I seen people with such severe disabilities. There were higher functioning people, to be sure, but many lay in gurneys or in wheelchairs. Only a few could speak. There were those who made odd sounds and exhibited odd behaviors. Never would I have met these residents had I not been asked to serve there. And as I became better acquainted with the disability world, for want of a better term, and met individuals all along the spectrum of disability, I came to realize that there was a whole population out there who never had the opportunity to attend services or have services provided for them at their places of residence. There are approximately 700 chapters of ARC throughout the country who have Jewish residents. There are people in group homes and assisted living residences, homebound elderly who somehow slip through the cracks and whose spiritual needs are never tended to. The first order of business for rabbis and interested lay people to ask is, who are the people being left out? How can we include them? Make inquiries of local group homes, of the facilities I mentioned above. Are there Jewish residents interested in attending services? It is often helpful to speak to those in charge of the recreation department, as those people arrange outings or arrange for someone to come to their facility. In areas with large Jewish populations, often there are paid chaplains who perform these tasks. But in places lacking a large Jewish community, or one that is spread out over a wide area, with a handful of Jews here, a handful of Jews there, there may be no professional to see to their spiritual needs. I work with a woman who is a member of a Reform synagogue in northern New Jersey, who has made it her business to ensure that a group of 5 elderly women residing in an assisted living facility go to her synagogue once a month. I arranged for a man living in a group home in central New Jersey to take a taxi once a month to go to services. Members from the Hunterdon Developmental Center have been coming for the past 16 years to my synagogue monthly and on holidays. Congregants may have family members with a disability who have been reluctant to attend services. Can these family members be made to feel more welcome? Can rabbis or knowledgeable lay people make time in their busy schedules, provide services where these individuals live? I, as I mentioned, am a full-time pulpit rabbi, and I have some experience in these matters. And I believe that most of my colleagues could spare an hour here or there, weekly or monthly, to conduct services at a local facility. The father of a member of my congregation until recently went to the local veterans hospitals to do services on a regular basis. It is a matter of priorities. I have learned in my many years in the rabbinate that people make time for what they consider important. If inclusion is important, it will become part of the fabric of the synagogue's life. Having identified those with disabilities interested in attending services, the next step is dealing with how to get them there. Here I have enjoyed the privilege of working with some very creative people in finding means of transportation. A colleague of mine and I founded a nonprofit organization called Open Road in 1999, dedicated to the purpose of bringing individuals with disabilities to houses of worship of their choice on a regular basis. It is an interfaith organization which frankly has succeeded more in the non-Jewish community than in our own. But essentially we have partnered with local public transportation agencies in New Jersey. With our group homes, we have used taxis and arranged rides, literally whatever works. The 5 women that I mentioned above who attend synagogue monthly are transported by the Bergen County, New Jersey transit system, which provides a fully insured and accessible county vehicle with trained driver. Open road and the synagogue divide the cost of the trip, which runs about $100 monthly. We have paid taxi fare for a gentleman with disabilities who is ambulatory but not able to make travel arrangements on his own. I would call the dispatcher of a taxi service near where he lived with drop-off and pickup times. Never had a problem, and he enjoyed being at the synagogue immensely. I could be quite specific with the various means Open Road has employed to bring people to services, but some of those means have yet to be tried successfully outside of New Jersey. I would welcome the opportunity to share at length the partnerships Open Road has established, and perhaps this webinar will make that possible outside of this presentation. But the premise is simple. People with disabilities need accessible vehicles and sometimes staff to accompany them. The vehicles, especially on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, are often not in use, and there are drivers and staff available. The resources are out there, and with just a modicum of effort and creativity, they can be put to use. At this point, having identified and transported those with disabilities to the synagogue, the next level up on the pyramid is to enable them to participate to the greatest extent possible. There is a wealth of material out there on how to make a synagogue building accessible. There are resources for the hearing and seeing impaired. The Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West New Jersey has on its website a fantastic guide to ensuring that one synagogue is accessible. I commend their efforts and need not reinvent the wheel here. I want to focus on the human, spiritual dimensions of inclusion. One of the adjectives now used to describe those with disabilities is differently abled. I find the term helpful because it points to an essential attitude, or should I say a paradigm shift to a new attitude, that I believe is so important to the enterprise of inclusion. Individuals with disabilities are not object to be pitied or helped or served. Rather, they are people who are differently abled, with the emphasis on abled, bringing their own set of gifts and contributions to their communities. This is particularly true of those with whom I have worked most, those with severe cognitive impairments who are not ambulatory or verbal. Shortly after, a number of residents of the Hunterdon Developmental Center began attending my synagogue monthly and on holidays. A staff member suggested that the attendees pay some percentage of regular synagogue dues. Each resident has a personal account with limited funds that are reserved for his or her use. Why not ask the residents to use some of their money to contribute to the synagogue? Also, at least once a year, these same residents sponsor a KIDDIUsh, pooling their resources to provide lunch to our 50 or so regular Shabbat morning attendees. Now these residents can no longer be considered the unfortunate recipients of synagogue largesse, but dues-paying members giving back to their community. Several of these residents actively participate in the services as well. As I mentioned, they attend my weekly service on the Hunterdon Developmental Center grounds and are familiar with parts of the service. 3 or 4 are verbal enough to utter syllables of the blessings before and after reading the Torah, and so they receive aliyot, Torah honors, during services at my synagogue. I will sing along with them, filling in the words they can't say. I take my talit, prayer shawl, touch it to the parchment of the Torah scroll, and bring it to their lips. No part of the ritual is omitted. When the Torah scroll is taken around the sanctuary, we make sure that all the residents have a chance either to kiss or to receive assistance in kissing the scroll. Over the years, they have celebrated with the congregation numerous b'nai mitzvah and ofrufs. On more than one occasion, I have said to the bar or bat mitzvah, now look, so-and-so from the developmental center may make some strange noises or blurt out a line from a movie during your chanting of your haftarah, the prophetic reading. Just be prepared and roll with it. And so they have. Not a single celebrant has ever said, Rabbi, this could be a problem. None have ever been thrown off. My students think of it as normal to have folks lying in gurneys attending their B'nai Mitzvah, blurting out in the middle of services, "It's a beautiful day," all part of our congregation. And those with disabilities should, if it is possible, have their own B'nai and B'not Mitzvah. The Jewish community has, from what I have read and seen, been better about enabling children to celebrate a bar bat mitzvah. The movie Praying with Laor is a wonderful example of how a young man with Down syndrome prepared and celebrated his bar mitzvah. And there is a synagogue near me in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, under the supervision of a member of my congregation that has done amazing work with severely autistic children, preparing them for their B'nai Mitzvah. But there are a fair number of 30 and 40-something Jewish men and women who were not so fortunate. They were not able even to walk into a synagogue, much less celebrate a bar bat mitzvah there. I want to share with you something I presented at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College a number of years ago. I described two B'nai Mitzvah celebrations that we had at my synagogue for the 7 residents of the Hunterdon Developmental Center. Here is what I wrote. I saw the possibility open up for the residents at the HDC to have a bar bat mitzvah. Keep in mind that most of the residents were in their 30s or 40s, having been denied the opportunity to have a bar mitzvah at the usual age. Only a few had been to my synagogue for the second day of Rosh Hashanah at that point, and none knew the procedure for taking Aliyah. To help me with the procedural part, I enlisted the aids of some of my high school students who were tutoring the shul's pre-bar and bat mitzvah students. Weekly, they would join me at the Hunterdon Developmental Center and work one-on-one with the residents. The students and I learned together how to adjust to their different capabilities. One resident, for example, could say a few words of the bracha, blessing, and my student would fill in the rest. Another enjoyed movement, so we printed on 10 by 12 poster boards the words of the brachot, the blessings, and he would hold them up. A third activated her machine on cue with the words of the blessings programmed in it. We had 2 group celebrations, one in 1996 and the other in 1998. 4 residents participated in the first, 3 in the second. Family members from all over the country and Israel came. We sent out invitations. There were flowers on the bima with a lovely kiddish following services. My Hebrew high school students led the services, read Torah, and one gave the sermon because I wanted them, the younger generation, our future Jewish leaders and congregants, to see that individuals with disabilities could participate, and I wanted them to be an integral part of the celebration. For the first time, families, some of whose members came from as far as Florida and Israel to celebrate, as I mentioned, sat with their institutionalized children in a non-institutional setting, with the community, not a group of paid staff around them. One cannot emphasize enough how isolating having a child with a disability can be. Never to have the opportunity to enjoy communal celebrations or life cycle events is even more salt on the wound. These celebrations help to make things right. Also, the celebrants were seen in a new light by members of my congregation. Rather than disabled people to be pitied, they were differently abled participants in a ritual familiar to them all. You could almost see the lights go off in my members' heads. My child did this. Wow! These folks from HDC can do it too. They were not merely recipients of my congregation's generosity, taking from the community, but givers as well. And for the moment, it changed the dynamic of the relationship between them. And it is this changing of the dynamic that represents to me the aim of inclusion, the apex of the pyramid. Synagogues can and do invite individuals with disabilities to sit passively through a service, or create a special service at a different time for them. I in no way want to minimize or disparage these efforts, but it must be kept in mind that adults with disabilities may have a mental age of 3, but a mental age of 3 in a 30, 40, or 50-year-old body with all those years of life experience. They are truly adults, and not only should be included in the regular adult services, but afforded the opportunity to participate. If individuals can help open the ark or be a greeter, then let them perform these tasks. I have only one HDC resident who attends services regularly at my synagogue and who loves to let out a kind of whoop at the end of the recitation of the full Kaddish when the congregation joins in singing the prayer, Oseh Shalom. She never makes the sound at any other point during the service, only then and precisely when the congregation sings Amen. And all should be invited to join in the oneg or kiddush afterwards. I have learned so much from working with the residents of the developmental centers. They have taught me to look beneath the surface of the individual to see his or her true character, that nonverbal individuals have no problem conveying their wants and needs and can at times be demanding critics. They have taught me what is essential to the service, the music, the ritual, the use of touch and sound. They have taught me what a true understanding of holiness means, even without speaking a word. One of the residents of the HDC who had his aforementioned bar mitzvah at my synagogue, a man by the name of Michael, was about 30 at the time. He was a character, always playing around. He was only able to kiss the Torah with his talit and articulate the sound of Ra, of the word Torah at the end of the brachot, the blessing, but that was enough for me. But the problem was that when we tutored at the HDC, he would come up to the Torah, kiss it, then run away laughing, return for a few seconds and do the same thing. Never in the 6 months could I get him to take it seriously, however hard I tried. Then came the day of his bar mitzvah. I will never forget his father, so anxious and worried, suggesting to me before services that perhaps he should not go through with it, that Michael would make a fool of himself, running off the bimah in the middle of his aliyah. Jack, I replied, please give him a chance. I have to say that I was a little worried myself, but I had this feeling he would come through. Well, wouldn't you know, Michael came up, kissed the scroll, joined me in the Ra at the conclusion of the word Torah in the first bracha. Then he proceeded to stand stock still, reverently I would say, as I read from the Torah scroll, and then joined me in the concluding bracha. First time he ever did so. I don't know about you, but I call that understanding. Michael understood the significance of what he was doing far better than some of our community's highly intelligent but jaded 12 and 13-year-olds for whom bar mitzvah is an occasion for an extravagant party. He, without saying more than a syllable, got the sanctity part down just fine. A final few other possibilities for inclusion. Congregations can take the lead, when possible, to employ those with disabilities. The current unemployment rate nationally among those with disabilities is 12%, and there are few things that can confer more dignity on a person than providing him or her with a job. For example, through one of ARC's programs called Project Hire, my synagogue retains the service of an autistic man who does supervised cleaning of our building twice a week. He has, over the years, become an integral part of the day-to-day operations, and his father has told me repeatedly, the man is Jewish, how much his son enjoys being in shul. Those with disabilities should be invited to all social and non-religious events. The residents of the HDC attended our Israel Independence Day parade one year when we marched down Main Street in Flemington, and have attended our special synagogue anniversary dinners, dressed to the nines, I might add. They helped to write a letter in the Sefer Torah, a new Torah scroll we have recently commissioned. It should also be the responsibility of both our rabbis and interested lay people to ensure that end-of-life issues are not ignored. People with disabilities grieve too, and can use the presence of a rabbi, especially if they cannot attend the funeral of a beloved member or devoted staff. I discovered a number of Jewish residents in institutions and group homes in my area alone, who have no family and no funeral arrangements. I remember a few years ago working with a member of the staff of the Greenbrook Regional Center going through the list of Jewish residents, contacting our local funeral home, and making sure that when the time comes, they will have a Jewish burial in a Jewish cemetery with a rabbi. We should not abandon our people with disabilities in life or in death. And with talk of death, it is time for me to end my discussion. It is very difficult to squeeze the lessons of more than a quarter of a century of work into 25 minutes, and now to summarize it all in 5. But here goes. First of all, given our longer lifespans, the question is not if, but when we or a member of the family or a friend will become disabled in some fashion. The Disabilities Inclusion Initiative is not only a noble undertaking, but now more and more a necessity. To include adults with disabilities, whatever level of severity, is eminently doable, but it does take time, effort, and a bit of creativity. Most of all, it takes commitment on the rabbi's part, on the part of the staff and lay people. I have discovered that while an entire congregation may officially be on board for inclusion, it is the work of a devoted few that makes it happen in both synagogues and churches. To accomplish the goal of inclusion, think of a version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base of the pyramid is identifying those with disabilities, contacting facilities, group homes, adult communities in one's area. Let it be known through your publicity materials, bulletins, and newsletters that you consider inclusion a priority and offer to make house calls, as it were, to visit and or provide religious services where individuals reside. Technology has made it easier to allow people to access services online, but nothing can replace the one-to-one interaction, the presence and touch of another human being. Next, make sure that your synagogue is accessible and transportation provided. The Federation of Greater Metro West in New Jersey has created a most comprehensive checklist of accessibility, an incredible guide to how to make your synagogue accessible. I encourage everyone to visit their website. As to transportation, this can be a difficult issue, and it would take me another session to describe what I and others have tried to do to bring people to a church or synagogue. In partnership with a few others, I have helped found a nonprofit organization devoted exclusively to transportation. It has enjoyed only limited success. All I can say is there is no one way, but taxis, carpools, agencies, and government-owned vehicles are all possibilities. Third, once you have identified those with disabilities of all levels who are interested in participating in religious life and brought them to the synagogue or have arranged religious services for them where they live, then comes the final stage of inclusion. That is finding ways for them to be an active part of congregational life. Think not disabled, but differently abled, and how individuals might contribute to the community, paying some form of dues, sponsoring a kiddish, even adding a single syllable to the liturgy. Include everyone in all life cycle events and make it possible for them to be celebrants if possible. Consider social events at the synagogue as well. Inclusion does not mean just being there. It means being an active part of the community. A rabbi, a religious leader, and the membership should regularly ask themselves, who is not being included in our community? Why not? How can we ensure that they are? Make inclusion part of the culture of your synagogue, and inclusion in the fullest sense of the word will happen. In the famous rabbinic commentary called the Mechilta, we read about the condition of the Israelites camped at Mount Sinai before they received the Ten Commandments. At the moment when Israel stood at the base of the mount and all said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do," there were among them neither lame nor blind, neither mute nor deaf, nor mentally disabled persons. Similarly, at the final redemption, rabbis say that all whom God has smitten in this world, God will heal in the world to come. So at Mount Sinai, God healed all those with disabilities, and so too, God will do so at the end of days. In between, those with disabilities are our responsibility, and how we treat them says much about ourselves and our communities.